Ladies and gentlemen, we're on day 231 of Russia's invasion and on year 9 of Russia's war against Ukraine. My name is Andriy Shevchenko. On behalf of the team of Mediacentrу Ukraina, I would like to welcome all the journalists telling the world about our struggle for freedom. Over the past 24 hours, the armed forces of Ukraine have established a presence and held a presence in the Ukrainian south, continuing to liberate the territories of the south. Today we'll be talking about this with Serhii Khlan, deputy of the Kherson Regional Council. Good morning, sir. What's news today? Good morning from Kherson and Slava Ukraini. We had information today that our armed forces have announced the final liberation of 5 more places: Novokamenka, Novoheroivka, Tritonovka, Chervone. Among others, these are localities that essentially even out the front line. What do I mean by that? We all remember that the counteroffensive, which started just over a week ago, armed forces were pushing along the Dnipro from Osokorivka to Duchane along the bank of the Dnipro. And as far as the river Ingulets is concerned, then they were moving along from Vysokopilya to Davydiv Brid. Essentially, they formed this kind of cauldron. And the liberation of today's 5 localities is summation, is essentially an evening out, a leveling of the front. Essentially, all of the cauldron where the Russians had been captured is now cleared, has now been cleared by our armed forces, and the front line is evened out and approaching the fighting for Bereslav in the suburbs of Bereslav. The importance of Bereslav is that it is a town that reaches that takes our forces to the control of the Kakhovka hydropower plant, water power plant, on the right bank of the Dnieper, which is extremely important because the occupiers have temporary crossings there, and they have the ability to move supplies there, and they've also established alternative crossings near Nova Kakhovka. So control over Bereslav and exits to the Kakhovska water electric plant dam is extremely strategically important, and our forces have essentially almost reached the control of these territories. We've also had information that the Russians have established 2 new crossings. There have been satellite images. What is the situation on the right bank, on the territory that's under Russian control? What have the last several weeks changed? So these 2 alternative crossings that were established by the Russians are crossings around Darivka over the Ingulets River. It is these 2 crossings that allow the river Ingulets, the left and the right bank of separates the Kherson region into 2 parts. This one part is this northern direction, the Bereslav direction, where there's a counteroffensive going on. The other part of right bank Kherson is Kherson itself and the Mykolaiv direction. It is these 2 alternative crossings that the occupiers have established in Darivka allow the occupiers to move technology, move weaponry that they're trying to move through Nova Kakhovka and again the dam of the Kakhovka power plant, strengthening the Mykolaiv direction, and vice versa. When necessary, they can move reinforcements from the Kherson direction to Bereslav. So the capture of Bereslav and the control of the dam is a matter of principle. It's extremely important. However, try as the occupier might to establish all these alternative crossings, they still find themselves under constant fire control of our armed forces, and as the munitions are moving, they always keep getting artillery shelling from our armed forces, and this technology is getting destroyed. That is being prepared to be moved, and also the personnel. Over the past few weeks, the Ukrainian armed forces, or perhaps the forces of security and defense, have liberated dozens of localities in the Kherson region. What is the situation there? What are the people saying? What do we see? Over the past 10 days, we've liberated 29 localities, uh, 1,100 square kilometers in the north of the Kherson region. What the occupiers have left behind, it's very hard to call it localities or places or towns because these are all ruins. And the people that are now in these liberated territories are in extremely the humanitarian situation is absolutely dire. So the number one objective is to help these people with humanitarian cargo, with the construction materials, and right now work is ongoing to reestablish power supply in these towns. There are people who categorically refuse to evacuate, in spite even of the fact that after liberation, they understand that when the occupier has left nothing behind, has left no stone unturned, and they keep shelling, the occupiers keep shelling, keep firing at these towns. So people are actually in grave danger, but many of them still refuse to leave their homes. They said, "We've survived this. Now we're living in our liberated land, and we will continue living here." So the objective now is to help people with a power supply, with food, with construction materials, with medications, and of course water, because there's serious problems with potable water. This is being provided both by charity foundations in Kryvyi Rih at the moment, and they're also working with regional deputies, and the military administration of the region is also helping these people in order to let them establish some kind of decent living. What is the situation in the occupied part of the oblast? Ukraine has consistently called on people who find themselves there, who are still there, to evacuate. Um, as we anticipate possible active hostilities, we know that the opportunities to evacuate were extremely limited until now. Have there been any changes? The occupiers have essentially blocked uh, exits from the occupied territory, but now they have established a system of electronic passes. Of course, this system they have introduced leaves very much to be desired, because in some towns there isn't even internet, so people can't even uh, submit this application. But in small batches of 20 to 30 people have started evacuating, in spite of the fact that the occupiers have introduced this since October 1st. So October 1st was a weekend. So they started explaining starting Monday, and it was difficult all week, all the first week. But now they are issuing these permits, these passes. People are starting to evacuate, but again, in very small batches, very small numbers of people. Essentially, the occupiers is slowing down the evacuation. At the same time, they offer people to move to Crimea for their health, sort of, in order to be safe from artillery shelling. So they play this sort of funny propaganda where, including to children, who are obviously now part of the schooling process, they are now forcefully sending plans to occupational authorities, plans on moving parents, children, and the elderly to Crimea, supposedly motivating this with questions of security. But we understand that this is no more than, again, forced deportation in the light of the deoccupation of the Kherson region. And this happened in the occupied Kharkiv region, where children were sent to Russia, and after the deoccupation, the children were not given back to the parents. And so we see the same scenario unfolding right now in occupied Kherson region. The occupiers want to forcibly deport children and the elderly, and they're even looking at parents, to the Russian Federation in order to keep them there as hostages in the light of the deoccupation of the Kherson region. So we call on people to resist these propaganda materials about moving to Crimea or any other part of the Russian Federation. People are advised to find better options for security, to find food and water, and in case of active hostilities, to wait in those places, believe in the armed forces of Ukraine, wait for liberation, and where possible, evacuate to Ukraine-controlled territory. A final question: has anything changed in occupied territories after the so-called annexation of the Ukrainian south? The only thing that's changed was the fact that the Russians keep losing their annexed territories. There's less and less territory. They've lost over 1,100 square kilometers in 29 localities over the past 10 days, and this trend will continue, and the Kherson region will continue ending up under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this pseudo action has no effect and will have no effect. We will liberate our land. We will liberate the Kherson region. Serhii Khlan, a deputy of the Kherson Regional Council, thank you for this conversation. Our next briefing will be at 12:30, and we'll be talking to Alexander Staruch, head of the Zaporizhia Regional Military